I've worked the night shift at Joe's Convenience for 3 years now. It's quiet mostly. The occasional drunk stumbling in for cigarettes, the late-night trucker grabbing coffee. But last Friday was different. It started like any other shift. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the faint smell of stale coffee lingered in the air. Around 2 a.m., I noticed the parking lot was unusually empty. Even the usual crowd of teenagers who hung around outside had vanished. It was eerily silent, except for the hum of the refrigerators. At 2:15, the bell above the door jingled. A man walked in. He was tall, wearing a tattered hoodie that obscured most of his face. Something about him felt off. His movements were too smooth, almost mechanical. He didn't head for the aisles like most customers. Instead, he stood by the door, facing the security camera. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. He didn't respond. Instead, he tilted his head, slightly, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. The air grew heavy, and I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he turned and walked to the back of the store, disappearing behind the shelves. I took a deep breath, trying to shake the unease. I told myself he was probably just another odd customer. But then, the power flickered. For a few seconds, the store was plunged into complete darkness. When the lights came back on, the man was gone. I quickly checked the security monitors. There was no sign of him. Not in the aisles, not by the register, not even outside. It didn't make sense. I hadn't heard the door chime again. At 2:45, the bell rang again. This time it was a young woman, probably in her early 20s. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder as she entered. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Did you see him?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "See who?" "The man outside. He's been following me for blocks." My stomach dropped. "No one's come in recently," I lied. I didn't want to scare her further. She hesitated, then grabbed a bottle of water and came to the counter. As I rang her up, the bell jingled again. But when I looked up, no one was there. The door had opened and closed on its own. "Did you see that?" I asked her. Her face turned pale. "No, I don't think I can leave." I nodded. "You can stay here until it feels safe." We both sat behind the counter, the silence growing, heavier by the second. Then, the lights flickered again. This time, they didn't come back on. The store was plunged into darkness, save for the faint red glow of the emergency exit sign. The woman grabbed my arm. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I strained my ears. At first, I heard nothing. Then, faintly, the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the back of the store. I grabbed the flashlight we kept under the counter and shone it toward the aisles. The beam of light danced across the shelves, illuminating nothing unusual. The footsteps stopped. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking. No response, just silence. The woman was clutching my arm so tightly it hurt. Then, from the far corner of the store, something moved. It was too quick to see clearly, but it darted from one aisle to the next, the faint rustle of clothing the only sound it made. I pointed, the flashlight in its direction, but it was gone. "We need to leave," the woman whispered. I nodded, grabbing my keys. But just as we stood up, the footsteps returned. This time, they were faster, louder, coming straight toward us. I aimed the flashlight at the source of the sound, and there he was. The man in the hoodie, standing at the edge of the light. His face was still obscured, but his head was tilted again, as if studying us. "Get back!" I shouted, though my voice betrayed my fear. He took a step closer. The woman screamed, and that seemed to snap me into action. I grabbed her hand and bolted for the door, not bothering to lock it behind us. We ran into the night, the cool air biting at our faces. I didn't stop until we were several blocks away, standing under a streetlight. "What the hell was that?" she asked, her voice shaking. I didn't have an answer. When I finally worked up the courage to return to the store the next morning, the door was wide open. Inside, everything was untouched, except for the security cameras. Every single one of them had been smashed. I quit that day. I don't know who or what that man was, but I'm not sticking around to find out. The night shift isn't worth losing your sanity. It was a quiet night at the front desk of the old hospital. The kind of quiet that leaves you uneasy, as if the silence is hiding something sinister. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, its sound amplified in the stillness. I had worked the night shift countless times before, but tonight felt different, oppressive, like a heavy fog had settled over everything. The hospital, built in the early 1900s, had its fair share of ghost stories. Staff often shared tales of shadowy figures and disembodied voices. I dismissed most of it as overactive imaginations, but tonight, I couldn't shake the feeling that those stories weren't just stories. Around midnight, the usual hum of activity dwindled to nothing. The emergency room was empty, and the staff was either dozing or on rounds. I sat at the desk, scrolling through my phone to stay awake when the lights flickered. I glanced up, my heart skipping a beat. The flickering stopped, and I laughed nervously at my own paranoia. Then I heard it. Faint footsteps echoing down the corridor behind me. I turned, expecting to see one of the nurses, but the hallway was empty. "Hello?" I called out. No response. I shook my head and tried to focus on my phone again, but the unease grew. A few minutes later, I heard it again. Footsteps, but closer. They were slow and deliberate, like someone trying not to be heard. "Okay. This isn't funny," I said, standing up. My voice sounded braver than I felt. I grabbed the flashlight from the desk and started down the hallway. The beam of light swept across the floor, illuminating peeling paint and outdated posters. At the end of the hallway, a chill ran down my spine. The air was noticeably colder, and I could see my breath. "Is someone there?" I whispered. A faint laugh broke the silence, high-pitched and distorted. I spun around, shining the light, but I was alone. The sound of a door creaking open made me jump. It came from the abandoned wing of the hospital, a section closed off years ago. No one was supposed to go there, and the doors were locked. Heart pounding, I approached the door. It swung slightly, as if moved by a breeze, but there was no draft. Beyond it was darkness, impenetrable even with the flashlight. I hesitated but stepped through. "Hello?" I called again. The air was thick, and the smell of mildew overwhelming. The beam of my flashlight barely cut through the gloom, revealing broken furniture and crumbling walls. I heard the giggle again, louder now, coming from deeper within the wing. My hands trembled as I gripped the flashlight. The floorboards creaked under my weight. Then I saw it. At the end of the corridor, just beyond the flashlight's reach, was a figure. Small and hunched, it looked like a child, but its limbs were too long and thin. Its head tilted unnaturally to the side, as if studying me. "Are you okay?" I choked out, my voice shaky. The figure didn't respond. It took a step closer, and I stepped back. The light caught its face briefly, and I wished it hadn't. Its eyes were dark voids, and its mouth stretched into an unnaturally wide grin, filled with jagged teeth. The skin was pale and taut, stretched too tightly over its frame. I turned and ran, the flashlight swinging wildly as I bolted back toward the main hospital. My breath came in ragged gasps, and I could hear the footsteps behind me, faster and heavier now. It was chasing me. Reaching the desk, I grabbed the landline phone and dialed security, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the receiver. The line was dead. The footsteps stopped. I turned slowly, expecting to see the thing standing right behind me, but there was nothing there. The hallway was empty, eerily quiet again. The air still felt heavy, and my skin prickled with the sensation of being watched. I didn't dare move. Every shadow seemed to shift, every sound amplified in the silence. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A shadow darted across the wall, too fast to be human. "Please, just leave me alone," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. The lights flickered again, plunging the hospital into darkness for a few agonizing seconds. When they came back on, the figure was on the other side of the desk, staring at me with those empty eyes and that horrible grin. I screamed and threw the flashlight, but it vanished before the light could make contact, just gone. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, as if whatever it was had left. I spent the rest of the night huddled behind the desk, clutching a metal clipboard and jumping at every sound. When the morning shift arrived, I tried to explain, but they just gave me pitying looks. "Night shifts can mess with your head," one of them said. "You should get some sleep." I quit that day. No job was worth facing, whatever that was again. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear footsteps and that distorted giggle, as if it followed me home. I never believed the stories about night shifts being haunted. I figured they were just tales spun by bored co-workers. But after last night, I'll never work another graveyard shift again. It started like any other night. I was a receptionist at a small 24-hour clinic. Nights were quiet, mostly emergencies that couldn't wait until morning. The clock read 11:47 p.m. when I arrived. My co-worker, Sarah, handed me the patient log. "Just one guy in room 3, fever. Doctor's already seen him." "Easy night then," I said with a forced smile. Sarah left, and I settled in behind the desk. The lobby was empty except for the hum of the vending machine. I glanced at the security monitor, a grainy feed of 4 cameras. Lobby, hallway, supply room, parking lot, all quiet. Around 12:30 a.m., the automatic doors slid open. No one entered. The cold night air rushed in, and I peered out into the parking lot. Nothing. I waved a hand in front of the motion sensor. The doors hissed shut. "Faulty sensor," I muttered, returning to my seat. Minutes later, the hallway camera caught a shadow at the far end. I froze, staring at the screen. The shadow didn't move. It just loomed. "Maybe it's the patient," I whispered. Grabbing the clipboard, I walked down the hall. My footsteps echoed unnaturally. At room 3, I knocked. "Sir, are you all right?" No answer. I pushed the door open. The bed was empty, the room untouched. Confused, I double-checked. The log. Sarah had noted the room was occupied. Maybe she made a mistake, I reasoned. Back at the desk, the phone rang. 24-hour clinic, I answered. Heavy breathing filled the line. "Hello?" I asked again more firmly. The breathing continued. "Is this a prank? I'm hanging up." I slammed the receiver down, my hands trembling. The security monitor flickered. The shadow was closer, just outside room 3. I grabbed my flashlight and headed back down the hallway. When I reached room 3, it was still empty. Then the supply room door creaked open. "Hello?" I called out. Inside, my flashlight swept over shelves of bandages and syringes. At the far end, something moved. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall, its head tilted unnaturally. Its pale, translucent skin gleamed faintly under the beam of my flashlight. Its eyes were bottomless voids, staring right at me. My breath caught. The figure didn't move. I stumbled back, slamming the door shut behind me. Back at the desk, I called Sarah. Pick up, I muttered. Finally, she answered. Ali, what's wrong? Something's here, I whispered. The line went dead. The lights flickered violently before plunging the clinic into darkness. Emergency lights bathed the halls in dim red. On the monitor, the figure was in the lobby now, standing in front of the desk. I turned, but the lobby was empty. The figure on the screen tilted its head, then slowly raised a hand and pointed at me. Grabbed my bag and ran to the exit. The automatic doors didn't open. Panicking, I pounded on the glass. Behind me, footsteps echoed. I turned. The figure was there, standing at the edge of the red light, its head tilted at an impossible angle. "Why are you here?" I screamed. It took a step closer. "Stay away," I cried, backing against the doors. The figure stopped. Its dark eyes locked onto mine. In a voice that was both a whisper and a roar, it said, "You shouldn't be here." The lights flickered back on. The figure vanished. The doors hissed open, and I stumbled into the night, gasping for air. I quit the next morning. I don't know what I saw that night, and I don't want to know. Something is in that clinic. Something that doesn't belong in this world. And it doesn't want to be disturbed.